Wednesday. It's the 21st of March, 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 432, where we learn to be a better gamer and realize our door's open. We don't want to interrupt our roommates, but we're still better gamers. In today's Daily, we're going to discuss an ever-burning topic in Protoss vs. Terran, which is, how do I survive the mid-game? It's very easy to have some sort of fancy rush build, like DT Rush, or I'm thinking of like 4 Warp Gate, Warp Prism drops, all that sort of fun stuff. And then it's pretty fun to imagine our max deathball being 3/3, Zealot with speed, Archons, Colossus, so good. But it's that middle period where we don't quite have Colossus range yet, or we don't quite have that many Colossus yet. We don't really have that many upgrades. We kind of just have our basic gateway units, maybe an Immortal or two, and that Terran player is dropping us every which way. Wherever we seem to put our units, he seems to attack elsewhere, and we cry. And of course, the biggest tears of all come when he just straight up attacks our front and we die. Ugh. So we're going to look at way more games than I think I have time for. I have 8 games on the docket today, 8 of them. There's the list right open on the left monitor that we're going to try to go through to look at examples of how to deal with this mid-game aggression, kind of the psychology that happens, and how to combat negative psychology and reinforce positive things like you're awesome. Oh. But before we do, we have announcements. Most importantly of all, there's this esports poll that has absolutely no bearing on anyone, and if I win it, I'll win the famous No Prize. And here I am, you'll see me in an unbelievably tense bout against Total Biscuit. If you go to teamliquid.net, there is a topic about it, which is of course getting pasted in the chat, and you'll notice that me and Total Biscuit are seriously, like, really close. Let me just F5 it and see where I am. Okay, we're sort of comfortably 800 ahead, but if we could get this to be like 8,000 ahead, that would be great. If you're watching this on the archives and the answer is tomorrow, I will more than likely be facing the number 2 Special Tactics, which I will 100% get second place to, and I don't care, because you know what? I fight for freedom. Or something like that. I actually fight for trumpets. So if you'd vote, that'd be great. Other important announcement, right after the Daily, we're doing the After Hours Gaming League cast, because it is the playoffs of the Season 2 championships. Now, there are some pretty killer matchups, such as Microsoft versus Facebook, EA, Amazon. But of course, because I'm heavily biased, I selected Palantir versus Google as the match to cast, because my best friend Tristan works at Palantir. I don't actually know the results, but if Tristan gets 4-gated and loses, then I will not only tease him on air, but also for the rest of his life. Wonderful. Let's step into the PvT action right away, because I do not want to get caught with a Daily going over, because Rob Simpson is coming over to cast with me at 8:15, and I have to drive him to the airport afterwards at like 9:45. So I actually hope that this series is kind of short. Excellent, let's go into 8 games. Alright, first I want to start off by noting that I've kind of limited things down to largely early expand builds, because some of the timings become quite clear, but we want to most importantly have the logic under our belts. Here's the things that I want you to think about in this matchup. First of all, when does the Terran player get drops? Or I guess more in the player's seat, you want to be thinking, can my opponent be dropping me or not? That's the sort of first step. And then, when he's dropping me, can he be hitting me in 2 places at once or just 1? Let me give you an example. A Terran player very, very quickly gets medevacs and Marines with stim. He should have 2 medevacs popping out and about 16 Marines. This is what Bomber used to do. So in this particular circumstance, he can do a drop against us, but really only a small drop in 1 location. Or if, let's say, you did a 2 racks opening as Terran, you can very quickly get medevacs after that, but you don't really have a big army. You can pick the stuff up into the medevac and move it, but your leftover army on the ground is like a Marauder and 3 Marines. It's not like this 2-pronged attack. The other variable I want you to think about is, does the Terran have a small ground army or a large ground army? So I guess more specifically, the 2 axes that we're working with are small ground army or big ground army, and small medevac drops, large medevac drops, And the last one that kind of relates to both of these is hitting us at one place at once or a lot of places at once. I'm literally only doing one versus lots. That's all I really care about. So if we think about it in big versus small, a lot of drops versus small drops, or two places at once versus one place at once, we can start to see periods in Protoss versus Terran in the mid-game where we're going to have to worry about defending or where we can clearly have opportunities to attack. The negative psychology I talked about at the start of the show is something like, oh, he could drop me, maybe he isn't, maybe he's going to hit my front, I don't know. So I'm just going to sit on my ass the whole damn game until I'm maxed. And that actually can sometimes work because the Protoss maxed army is very potent, especially against a Terran that doesn't have good control. But we want to be a little more active than that, because once you get to the really good players, they'll just crunch your face. So there you go. That is what we're going to be talking about. So what we're going to go ahead and hop into right now is this game 1 with the sound enabled. A big answer that we're going to have at the start of this game, Iagia Puma, says SKMC. Something or other like that. What we're going to be identifying at the start of this game is when our opponent is going to be getting drop, most importantly, and whether he's going to be having small ground armies or big ground armies. In particular, we just scout, so we can get kind of an easy check on when the expansion is coming up, which is obviously indicated by the gas. And what we're going to see is this is an example of a game that works very well. How do we deal, or here's a good way to put it, at the start of any game, we're going to be up against one of two basic categories. The player gets a lot of ground units and a slow drop, or cuts out a good amount of ground units and gets a fast drop. Very broadly. Sure, he can maybe expand. Maybe he's going one base. Maybe he's going all Marines. Maybe he's going mostly Marauders, but still mainly ground units and no fast air, or some ground units and fast medevac air. Or he's just awful and he has a small amount of units and no air, right? But generally relatively big army early on, or relatively fast medevacs. So one of the first things that we're going to do right off the bat is we're just going to do some sort of poking. You don't really have to do this style that MC is doing exactly, where you get the exact amount of stalkers, but the important thing is that one of the first steps we're going to do is get a very quick expand, followed by lots and lots of sentries. 2 geysers worth of sentries. Not 3, but 2 geysers. And notice that MC is gonna just flood out oodles and oodles of sentries. For however you choose to open, yeah, we're gonna be trying to control space with a little bit of stalkerage. Just trying to push him back a little bit, allowing a probe to scoot himself forward. But literally, we're making probes, zealots, and sentries. We saw Naniwa do a similar style to this last week, but actually maybe 2 weeks ago. But 2 weeks ago when we were doing the Naniwa examination, we were looking specifically at the build he was doing. In this case, it's more of the general theory of the matchup. So excellent. At this point in time, he is either getting a really big ground army or he's getting fast air. We don't know which one. Sure, he's expanding. We kind of identified this early on. But we still don't know which one he's doing. This is where this kind of push comes in very handy. If he can't be dropping us, really, and if he can't be if he can't be dropping us because he doesn't have it, doing a lot of pokes like this are really, really good. What we're going to see from MC in a variety of other games is that these sorts of push timings are unhelpful, but this is the most basic push timing of all. Getting 3 gateways worth of units, attacking around 8 minutes and 30 seconds, throwing down force fields to do this kind of fun, aggressive attacking action. And if you're really starting to break through, reinforce with stalkers, what if we saw a ton of units? Specifically, what if we saw a good amount of Marauders here? That would be kind of a dead giveaway. Well, easy, we just end up kind of pulling back, and we have a pretty big ground army to deal with his pretty big ground army. All's pretty well. We're going to be looking at variants of this basic push quite a lot, but this is still going to get us a pretty good sense of what he's going to be doing. Now, this is where things get interesting. Obviously, MC's basically won the game. He's essentially crushed. But we don't care about that at this point in time. You're almost always going to force him to trade units. You're going to force him to have a small number of units. You've killed off some at the front. Now I want you to envision if you had never attacked the front at all. By the time he gets medevacs, and then a little bit of time passes, he'll have enough to do a drop, a small attack with a small drop at your back, and a small attack at the front. In other words, he'll be capable of two-pronged aggression. If you do this sort of attack to keep his numbers small, he's capable of one-pronged aggression. So he can do a drop, or push your front, or defend against one of these sorts of attacks, but not all of them. So we're going to see the next nice step in MC's structure of play. He's going to get 6 gateways and literally not use them. This is where the drop defense comes into play. We also see SK.MC taking an expand. Okay, excellent. Why are we able to take this expand right now? Because we traded some units. I don't mean crushed his attack. I don't mean destroyed the fronts. I mean traded some units. If we were unable to do a good trade of units, like let's say we wandered up and saw 7 bunkers and we're like, I don't want to attack that. We just pull back and we probably don't take that expansion. But we managed to get a little bit of a good trade. We were able to take this expansion. And now I want you just to note that these warp gates are pretty much going to stay idle. This is a period in Protoss vs. Terran where you're largely a defender. You largely have to defend. You're getting away with an expand, and you're getting away with doing clever tech things in the main because he has a smallish total ground army. We don't care that much if he has a lot of medevacs or if he doesn't because of that cool attack that we did right before he got the medevacs. It kept his unit count low. So all we know is that he's going to have kind of a... he can maybe start rebuilding a little bit of a ground army. He can maybe do drops, but what we're going to do is leave all our warp gates very much so idle and just do mad teching. We get 1 observer out. This observer is mainly going to spot for drops. We don't really care that much. We see MC get 2 observers. I actually prefer that strongly, but at the very least we're going to get 1 observer. And this observer is largely going to be a spotter. At this period of time, from 12 minutes to 16 minutes, we don't want to attack, really. We really just straight up don't want to attack, strictly. We want to play defensively. We want to get these double upgrades going. I want to keep these warp gates selected for as long as possible, keeping a good sense of what's going on with the observer. Literally just spotting, spotting, spotting. We keep the sentries that we had at the front there. Look at this, still not building, still not building. And then the instant a drop comes, we can do a little bit of defense with that. Idle gateways for defense is like so important. Notice that MC built 3 gateways after this attack happened and literally didn't use them. It's really easy to just go into Terran style macro where we're always building the instant we can. We just build a zealot. When the warp gate's done, we build a zealot, and then we just build another zealot. Just keep going and never miss it, because that's what good macro is. In Protoss vs. Terran, getting these extra warp gates so we can warp in wherever we need to is a great technique when he's only capable of doing small drops. Small drops, because again, can he do smallish drops or big drops? And does he have a small ground army or a big ground army? Asking this question allows us to conclude if he can do a big 1-pronged attack or a 2-pronged attack. And it's the number of prongs that's most important. So in this circumstance, looks like there's a small 2-pronged attack coming down here. We also see that there was a little bit of an attack up here. The gateway warping totally let us comfortably manage this attack. Very comfortably. And again, look now, only now as we're really starting to get Zealot leg speed and blink, do we really feel like we need to go back into macro mode. But mainly, in this period of time where the Terran player just now has gotten medevac drops, Another big question that we're going to be asking ourselves is, did we manage to successfully kill that much? I actually need to really speed through this game really quickly, so that way we can just look at the broad concepts over and over and over again. As we're starting to worry about bigger drops, we need to get blink, or we need to just leave a whole bunch of stuff in the back of our base. As we're swatting these things away, we need to be really careful. Blink is generally our signifier of move out. Because if for some reason we get to the middle of the map and a drop happens, we can always blink and return back home pretty quickly. And of course, track down the medevacs. Notice, as we moved out, we leave all our warp gates idle, so that way we can do this kind of defense of the multiple prongs. And right when we get blink, we're starting to just work our way forward. The instant we kill off a good amount of stuff in an engagement is almost always a good time to attack. Almost always. We don't want to be doing too much earlier commitment unless we pretty much guarantee to have killed off a big attack. Because at this point in time, as we switch to the Puma cam, all his medevacs have kind of returned back home because he lost a lot of units. And MC gets a nice, clean, easy win. Now, what I want to do is start blasting through 2 games that show this... Dropped a few frames, haha. That show this center period, the 12 to 16 minute mark, where we try to attack and it doesn't actually work out that well. Let me go to Shakura's Plateau, another game between Puma and MC from IEM. I'm literally ×8ing this, so that way we can get as much information, or as many examples out as possible. But damn, do I really need to start streaming through these. Holy cow. Okay, once again, MC is going to go for a relatively fast 1-gate expo. We're planning on doing some aggression if we identify that he is going for a fast expand, largely sentry-based. MC goes ahead and gets this robotics facility. This will make our aggression a little bit lighter because we don't quite have the money to sustain all that production. We get shoved back a little bit because sure, he can maybe do some small ground aggression, but not any sort of big drop aggression. And so this push here is designed to try to trade units a little bit. But I want you to note that we didn't actually successfully trade that many units. We didn't really get the chance to do any sort of good trades. We're trying to find a place to pierce in. But once again, we're going to get our 6 warp gates that we're not really going to use very much. We're going to get our Colossus with our range. We're going to get our Forge up. And we're going to see that, yeah, look, not really morphing in that many units. Not really morphing that many in. Now we just managed to do a round, as we got to see some units moving out across the map. We're going to have to morph in a little bit more than we did before, because obviously he's probably making more units, but this is where I feel a little bit of an error ends up cropping up into play. We see MC building up a huge force. He's getting Zealot with leg speed. Zealot with leg speed almost always signifies that you're going to be doing a big frontal attack. Almost always. Players are starting to steer more and more clear from these Zealot legs. Notice that even though MC got Zealot legs, he's still playing defensively because right now we're worried about multiple pronged aggression. We haven't really killed off that much. So we're almost obligated to leave these stalkers back here and obligated to play in a fairly defensive positioning. The big edge we're going for, by the way, is in upgrades. We see the blink coming up because... Where's the blink? We see the blink coming up because it's fairly hard to move out otherwise. But you'll notice this is the reason that this period of time is very difficult to just do a move out. Again, between 12 and 16 minutes is where multiple pronged aggression is good. And now notice that this prong is just pulling back. This could have been positioned to be hitting the front, but instead what Terrans will do is they'll pull back with one and they'll hit you at the front. The important part is still one prong over here, another prong over here. Terran can still comfortably split up their armies. Notice there's not a big differential in food. It's not like MC was screwed or Puma was getting a huge lead. But the important thing is that without this key upgrade, this blink, And let me actually back up just a few seconds. And without leaving these warp gates idle, notice that we just did a round of warping. Here it comes. Bum-ba-dum-ba-dum. Here's all our gateways. We're leaving them nice and wide open. There's the scan. So Puma knows that he can end up darting on inward. And then as this drop ends up popping in, this is where we need this Blink Stalker plus a warping round to be able to stay alive. And once this happens, where we end up losing all that jazz, MC is almost forced to do this, and I know that this has happened very often to very many Protoss players. This kind of ugliness ends up happening where we feel like we have to attack. Hey, maybe we could have even poked up here and picked off this expansion. Maybe we could have played it slow with our Colossi, but no, we had this drop in our main. Attacks between the 12 and 16 minute mark are very risky for Protoss unless you've killed a good amount of stuff off. So we're going to look at that in part number 2. I want to do a third game, but I realized it was too slow in part number 1. So we're going to keep going through examples, looking at how the information we gain from some early pressure can help us sort of spread our defenses out in a good way. So, sweet. Going on to part number